So today we're doing graphs of sine and cosine, but specifically transformations with those graphs. So here is this question. What type of transformation is this, and then what is that called? So you've done this before, but if you add things on inside the parentheses with the x, this will be a horizontal translation or a horizontal shift. So a note just for vocabulary, when a function is periodic, the horizontal translations are called phase shifts. So you'll see throughout the notes and the homework and the test and all that kind of stuff, it will ask you, is there a phase shift? That means, is there a horizontal translation? Did you move your graph left or right? So putting all of our different types of things together, these would be your basic trig functions. The a value is going to be your vertical stretch or shrink. And how that affects your graph is it's going to affect your amplitude. The b value right here is going to be your phase shifts. So that's left or right. And then the k right here is going to be a horizontal stretch. What that is going to do is change your period. And then the c value at the end is your vertical shift, so going up or down. So they do all the same things they've normally done before, just all in one thing, and then with sines and cosines instead of our normal graphs. So here we want to sketch this graph. First, you want to find your amplitude, period, and phase shift, and that's going to help you then graph. So the amplitude is going to come from the 2 right here. And then the period is from the 2/3. So take 2 pi divided by 2/3, which then is going to be the same as multiplying by 3/2. So you get 2 pi times 3/2. The 2's will cancel and you'll get 3 pi as your period. And then the phase shift comes from this chunk right here. So since it's negative, you're going to go right pi/2. And then there's no place for this, but I'm just going to make a note somewhere that we have this +1. So you want to go up 1 at the end. So for my own sanity, I tend to graph the stuff here, the period and the amplitude first. Once I have that sketched out, then I'll add in the phase shifts and the vertical shifts, just so I can do things in 2 steps instead of all at once. So you want to do what we've done before and set up your graph and start with your standard period. So you have 3 pi, cut it in half, and then into fourths. So half of 3 pi is 3 pi/2. And then you can keep going from there, dividing up all of your stuff. So next what we're going to do is sketch what it would be with an amplitude of 2 and this period. So I'll mark here. This would be 2 and -2. So your original or standard graph before we do our shifts is going to start at 0, go up to 2, 0, down to -2, back to 0. So you get something like this. And then from here, we want to take this graph, move it right pi/2, and then up 1. So here for this, make sure you mark somehow what your shift is so I know what you're shifting. So here we're going to go pi/2 over for everything. And then up 1. So this point is going to move here and then up 1. This point is going to go over and up 1, etc., etc., for all of these. So we're now starting at 1 going up to 3. and then down and back up. So that would be your graph. All right, so another one here. Our amplitude, since there's nothing written, is going to be 1. Your period comes from this 2, so 2 pi divided by 2 is going to give you pi. And then you have to be careful here on your phase shift. Before you can get your phase shift, you need to factor out the 2. So you can factor this out to sine of 2 times x minus pi over 6. And then this pi over 6 is then going to be your phase shift. So the phase shift is right pi over 6. And then go back to graphing this. So our period is pi, cut it in half and into fourths. Amplitude is just going to stay 1, and then we're not moving up or down, so I'm not going to add other marks. And then the standard graph is going to start at 0 for sine, and it's going to go up, down, down. And then we want to move this pi over 6, so make some sort of indication that you're moving pi over 6. This would then become 7 pi over 6. So this is going to move over here. This will move over. This will move over, move over, move over. And there is your new graph. Again, I'm not going to be super duper picky on your exactly correct scale as long as you can show me you know what you're doing and you're taking your graph and shifting it over or not. So that's some graphing. The next thing to do is to take the graph and then write the equation. So looking at this, we have to decide first, is it a sine or a cosine graph? And here there is no really like 1% or 100% right answer, because you could take a sine graph, shift it and make a cosine graph, or take a cosine graph, shift it and make a sine graph. So looking at this one, we're starting at the peak. So I'm going to say cosine just to go from there since we're starting at max. Write that down, starting at the max. If you're starting at 0, you can just do a sine function. Here we want to figure out the amplitude. So this would be the bottom, this is the top, there's half in between. You can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the amplitude is 5. Be careful here if you're shifted up or down, you want halfway from the middle of your graph, not necessarily 0. Then to find your period, this is 2 pi. So to figure out the period, count how many cycles you have in that. So we have 1, 2 cycles, or 2 times we did through our cycle. So then take 2 pi divided by 2 will give you your period. So our period here is pi. So then to write the equation, the amplitude goes out front, and then here we need whatever we divided by inside, and we have no shifts. So your equation is just y equals 5 cosine of 2x. So another one. Here we're starting at 0, so I'm going to say sine. Amplitude, it's a little hard to see, but we're starting there, and we have 1, 2, 3. So an amplitude of 3. Period, we want to figure out how many cycles happen in 2 pi. So we can go here, we have 1, 2, 3, 4. So count how many times you have. So then take 2 pi divided by how many you counted, and we get pi over 2 is our period. So to write the equation, we have our amplitude, sine, and then take whatever you divided by and put that in. And you can always check your answers, figure out what's the period of your new function. If it doesn't match what you want it to be, something went wrong. So one last one. Here we're starting at 0, so you can start with sine, or you could pick something else. Again, you could do cosine. Amplitude of 2, because we have 1, 2. And then period just looks like 2 pi, because we only have 1 cycle here. One note, we're not going up like normal, so we need a flip somewhere. So we need a vertical flip. So this would be y equals negative 2 sine of x. Or other options, you could do 2 cosine of x plus pi over 2 and just have a shifted graph. So shift this back over and you'd have a cosine. You also could do y equals 2 sine of x plus pi. So shift that all the way back over and you'd have a regular sine graph. So that's it. Check Schoology for your homework assignment, and we'll have another one of these tomorrow.